The USS Ronald Reagan, one of America's most formidable aircraft carriers, cut through the Pacific waters with the quiet confidence of a vessel that had seen its share of deployments. At over 1,000 feet long and housing more than 5,000 sailors and airmen, the massive ship was a floating city, one where every person had a specific role and mistakes could cost lives. On the flight deck, that reality was even more pronounced. The chaotic symphony of jet engines, spinning rotors, and shouted commands made it one of the most dangerous workplaces on Earth. Here, new personnel were expected to learn quickly or be reassigned. There was simply no room for error when multi-million-dollar aircraft and the lives of pilots and crew were at stake. Which city are you watching from? Share it in the comments. Maybe someone else from your city is here too. And remember, if you believe heroes appear in the most unexpected ways, hit subscribe and give this video a like. Petty Officer 3rd Class Vanessa Rodriguez stood at the edge of the flight deck, her dark hair tucked tightly under her cranial helmet, her yellow vest bright against the gray deck. As a new member of the flight deck crew, she was still learning the complex choreography of carrier aviation operations, and by all accounts, she was struggling badly. "Rodriguez, wrong signal again," shouted Chief Petty Officer Michaels, the flight deck chief, his voice barely audible over the roar of an FA-18 Super Hornet taxiing nearby. "That's how you get someone killed." Rodriguez lowered her signal paddles, her face burning with embarrassment beneath her helmet. "Sorry, Chief. I thought—" "Don't think. No," Michaels barked. "This isn't a classroom. One wrong move out here and someone loses a head to a propeller or gets sucked into an intake." It was her third week on the flight deck, and Rodriguez had yet to make it through a single shift without a major error. She mixed up hand signals, positioned herself in the wrong spots, and seemed perpetually overwhelmed by the pace and pressure of flight operations. The other deck crew had started placing bets on how long before she'd be reassigned to mess duty or some other less critical role. Lieutenant Commander James Harrison, the Air Wing's operations officer, watched from the island's superstructure as Michaels pulled Rodriguez aside for what appeared to be another stern correction. Harrison had reviewed her file when she first came aboard 3 weeks ago. On paper, she seemed promising. High marks in training, good fitness reports, recommendations from her previous commanding officers at shore installations, but something wasn't translating to the flight deck. "Still having trouble with the new girl, Chief?" Harrison asked later that day, when flight operations had paused. Michaels nodded grimly. "Never seen anything like it, sir. It's like she's never set foot on a carrier before, despite what her file says. Basic stuff, hand signals, deck positioning, aircraft handling procedures, she's clueless. Her record shows she completed all the required training at Naval Air Technical Training Center," Harrison noted. "With respect, sir, there's a difference between classroom training and the real thing. Some people just aren't cut out for the flight deck. I'm giving her till the end of the week, then I'm recommending reassignment. Can't risk safety out there." Harrison couldn't argue with that logic. The flight deck was no place for someone who couldn't keep up. Still, something about Rodriguez's situation nagged at him. Her personnel file showed a capable sailor with a solid understanding of naval aviation procedures. The disconnect between her record and her performance was puzzling. That evening, Rodriguez sat alone in the enlisted mess, picking at her food. The other flight deck crew gave her a wide berth. No one wanted to associate too closely with someone who was clearly on their way out. She was used to the isolation by now, but it didn't make it any easier. "Mind if I join you?" Rodriguez looked up to see Petty Officer 1st Class Sarah Chen, one of the few female aviation boatswain's mates on the carrier and a respected member of the flight deck crew. "It's a free country," Rodriguez replied with a shrug. Chen sat down across from her. "Rough day?" "Just like yesterday, and the day before that." "You know, most people would have quit by now," Chen observed. "Chief Michaels isn't exactly gentle with his criticism." Rodriguez stabbed at a piece of chicken on her tray. "I'm not a quitter." "No, you're not," Chen agreed, "which makes me wonder why you're struggling so much. Your file says you've had carrier experience before." "Files can say a lot of things," Rodriguez muttered. Chen studied her for a moment. "You know what I think? I think you're holding back. I just can't figure out why." Rodriguez looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that sometimes people have reasons for not showing what they're really capable of. I've been watching you, Rodriguez. Your mistakes aren't consistent. Sometimes you signal perfectly, then 5 minutes later, you make a rookie error on the same signal. That's not how learning curves work. Rodriguez's expression hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, Chen conceded, standing up. But whatever game you're playing, just remember, out on that flight deck, other people's lives are at stake. As Chen walked away, Rodriguez sat motionless, her food forgotten. The conversation had clearly struck a nerve, though no one else in the mess hall could have guessed why. The next morning, flight operations resumed at 6 a.m. The carrier was conducting qualification exercises for new pilots, which meant frequent launches and recoveries throughout the day. It was demanding work for the flight deck crew, requiring absolute focus and precision. Rodriguez reported for duty, her face unreadable behind her cranial helmet as Chief Michaels assigned positions. She was given the least critical role, far from the landing area, responsible only for equipment transport and basic safety checks. Try not to screw this up, Michaels told her bluntly. One more major mistake and you're done on my deck. The morning progressed without incident. Rodriguez performed her limited duties adequately, if not impressively. By midday, the tempo of operations had increased, with aircraft launching and recovering every few minutes as pilots practiced their carrier qualifications. At 1 p.m., everything changed. An FA-18 Super Hornet was on final approach when its right engine suddenly flamed out. The pilot, a lieutenant with limited carrier landing experience, compensated incorrectly, causing the aircraft to come in too fast and at the wrong angle. Wave off, shouted the landing signal officer, but it was too late. The Super Hornet slammed onto the deck, missed all four arresting wires, and careened forward, its landing gear collapsing under the impact. Sparks flew as metal scraped against the deck. The aircraft veered sharply to the right, directly toward a refueling station where two crewmen stood frozen in shock. What happened next seemed impossible to those who witnessed it. Rodriguez, who had been positioned nearly 50 yards away, moved with astonishing speed and precision. She sprinted across the deck, shoving both crewmen clear of the aircraft's path just seconds before it would have crushed them. Then, without hesitation, she climbed onto the damaged Super Hornet, reached into the cockpit, and activated the emergency canopy release, all while the aircraft was still sliding across the deck. With practiced movements that betrayed years of experience, she extracted the dazed pilot from the cockpit and dragged him clear of the aircraft, just moments before flames erupted from the damaged engine. The crash response team arrived seconds later, but Rodriguez was already directing them with authoritative hand signals, perfect textbook signals that she had supposedly been unable to master for the past 3 weeks. Foam on the starboard engine, secure the fuel lines, get a medical team here now, she shouted, her voice carrying with unmistakable command presence. Chief Michaels and Lieutenant Commander Harrison watched in stunned disbelief as the supposedly incompetent trainee orchestrated the emergency response with the skill and confidence of a seasoned flight deck veteran. Within minutes, the fire was contained. The pilot was receiving medical attention, and the damaged aircraft was being secured. The entire flight deck crew stood in shocked silence, staring at Rodriguez as if seeing her for the first time. Chief Michaels was the first to approach her. What the hell was that, Rodriguez? She met his gaze steadily. Just doing my job, Chief. Your job? He repeated incredulously. For 3 weeks you couldn't tell the difference between a launch signal and a taxi signal. Now suddenly you're running the whole damn crash response like you've been doing it for years. Before Rodriguez could respond, Lieutenant Commander Harrison stepped forward. I think we need to have a conversation, Petty Officer, in private. In Harrison's office, Rodriguez stood at attention, her yellow flight deck vest still smudged with soot from the crash. At ease, Harrison said, studying her carefully. I think it's time for some honesty, don't you? Rodriguez shifted to parade rest, but remained silent. I made some calls after what I saw out there, Harrison continued. Interesting thing, your personnel file has been heavily redacted. The version I originally received was missing quite a bit of information. The full version just came through from Naval Personnel Command. He opened a folder on his desk. Petty Officer First Class, Vanessa Rodriguez, not Third Class. Previously assigned to the USS Nimitz as part of the flight deck crew for 3 years. Received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism during an incident in the South China Sea in 2019. Rodriguez's expression remained neutral, but her posture tensed slightly. Care to explain why one of the most decorated flight deck crew members in the fleet is pretending to be an incompetent trainee on my carrier? For a long moment, Rodriguez said nothing. Then she sighed. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I'm here under orders, sir. Naval intelligence believes someone on this carrier is sabotaging aircraft. Subtle sabotage, the kind that could be mistaken for mechanical failure. Harrison's eyes widened. That's a serious accusation. Yes, sir. That's why they sent me. After the incident on the Nimitz, I was recruited for special assignments. My experience on the flight deck and my technical knowledge made me valuable for identifying potential sabotage. And your cover as an incompetent trainee? People don't guard their actions around someone they don't respect, sir. If someone is tampering with aircraft, they wouldn't be careful about hiding it from the new girl, who can't even get her signals right. Harrison leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Have you found anything? Not yet, sir. But today's incident wasn't an accident. The Super Hornet's engine didn't flame out naturally. Someone tampered with the fuel control system. It was designed to fail during landing when it would cause maximum damage. Jesus, Harrison muttered. Do you have any suspects? A few, sir, but I need more time to gather evidence. Time you no longer have, Harrison pointed out. After today's display, your cover is blown. Rodriguez nodded. I know, sir, but now I can shift to phase 2 of the operation with your permission. With your permission. What exactly is phase 2? Now that everyone knows I'm not incompetent, I can be assigned to aircraft inspections. My real expertise is in aviation mechanics and systems. If someone is sabotaging aircraft, I'll find the evidence. Harrison studied her for a moment. Why wasn't I briefed on this operation? Compartmentalization, sir. The fewer people who knew, the better chance we had of catching whoever is behind this. Naval intelligence believes this may be part of a larger pattern across the fleet. Harrison nodded slowly. All right, petty officer, you have my cooperation. But from now on, I want to be kept in the loop. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As Rodriguez turned to leave, Harrison added, And Rodriguez? That was some impressive work out there today. Regardless of your cover, you saved lives. She paused at the door. Just doing my job, sir. The real job. Word spread quickly throughout the carrier. By dinner, the entire ship was buzzing with the story of how the struggling trainee had transformed into a flight deck hero during the emergency. Rumors and theories abounded, but the truth was far more complex than anyone imagined. The next morning, Rodriguez reported to the flight deck in a different capacity. Gone was the uncertain trainee. In her place stood a confident, experienced petty officer first class, now officially assigned to the aircraft inspection team. Chief Michaels approached her as she prepared for her first inspection. So it was all an act? Following orders, Chief, she replied. Hell of an act, he admitted grudgingly. Though I have to say, watching you fumble basic hand signals was painful. Believe me, it wasn't easy, Rodriguez said with a small smile. Every instinct was screaming to do it right. Michaels shook his head. Well, I feel like an ass for how I treated you. Don't, she assured him. You did exactly what a good chief should do with an incompetent crew member. You were protecting your deck and your people. Before Michaels could respond, Lieutenant Commander Harrison approached. Chief, I need to borrow Petty Officer Rodriguez for a special inspection. Of course, sir, Michaels replied, still looking somewhat bewildered by the entire situation. Harrison led Rodriguez to a restricted area of the hangar deck, where an FA-18 had been isolated. This is the next aircraft scheduled for tonight's operations. I want you to give it a complete inspection. If someone is tampering with our planes, we need to catch them before another incident. Rodriguez nodded and got to work immediately. Her movements were methodical and precise as she examined every critical system of the fighter jet. After nearly 2 hours of meticulous inspection, she emerged from beneath the aircraft with a grim expression. Found something, sir, she said quietly, leading Harrison to the port engine access panel. Look at this. She pointed to a small, almost imperceptible modification to the fuel control unit. This has been altered to fail after approximately 60 minutes of operation. If this aircraft had flown tonight, the engine would have failed during the recovery phase. Can you tell who did this? Harrison asked. Not directly, sir, but this type of modification requires specific knowledge and tools. Not many people on board would have both. How do we catch them? Rodriguez considered for a moment. We need to set a trap. Make it known that this aircraft passed inspection and is scheduled for tonight's operations. Then we watch to see if anyone comes to check their handiwork. The plan was put into motion immediately. Word was spread that the FA-18 had been cleared for flight operations. Meanwhile, a concealed camera system was installed in the hangar bay, and Rodriguez and a small team of trusted personnel established a surveillance post. They didn't have to wait long. At 7 p.m., a figure in maintenance coveralls entered the hangar bay and approached the aircraft. The person looked around furtively before opening an access panel and reaching inside. "That's Lieutenant Wilson from engineering," Harrison whispered as they watched the video feed. "What the hell is he doing?" "Checking his work," Rodriguez replied grimly, "making sure his sabotage is still in place." They moved quickly, apprehending Wilson before he could finish his inspection. The lieutenant was taken into custody, and a search of his quarters revealed damning evidence: technical diagrams of aircraft systems with vulnerable points highlighted, communications with unknown contacts off the ship, and a list of previously targeted aircraft. During interrogation, Wilson eventually broke. He had been recruited by a foreign intelligence service during a shore leave in Singapore 2 years earlier. His mission was to cause non-fatal incidents that would raise questions about the safety and reliability of carrier operations, potentially forcing deployment delays or restrictions. "He never intended for anyone to die," Harrison told Rodriguez after the interrogation. "But as you and I both know, on a flight deck, there's no such thing as a safe failure." "No, sir," she agreed. "Every system is critical. Every failure is potentially catastrophic." In the days that followed, a thorough investigation revealed the full extent of Wilson's sabotage. 5 previous mechanical failures on the USS Ronald Reagan were linked to his activities. Fortunately, none had resulted in fatalities, though several had caused injuries and millions of dollars in damage. As the carrier returned to its regular operations, Rodriguez prepared to depart. Her mission complete, she was being reassigned, likely to another carrier where similar concerns had been raised. On her last day aboard, she was surprised to find the entire flight deck crew assembled to see her off. Chief Michaels stepped forward. "On behalf of the Air Department, we wanted to thank you," he said, uncharacteristically formal, "not just for catching Wilson, but for showing us that appearances can be deceiving." He handed her a small box. Inside was a custom-made challenge coin featuring the USS Ronald Reagan's flight deck insignia. "We don't normally give these to people who spend less than a month with us," Michaels said with a hint of a smile. "But we figured you earned it, even if you did drive me crazy with those deliberately bad hand signals." Rodriguez accepted the coin with a genuine smile. "Thank you, Chief. That means a lot." As she prepared to board the SAOD aircraft that would take her off the carrier, Lieutenant Commander Harrison approached for a final word. "Naval Intelligence is lucky to have you," he said, "but I can't help thinking the flight deck lost one hell of a petty officer when they recruited you." Rodriguez looked out across the vast flight deck, watching the choreographed precision of the crew at work. "I miss it sometimes," she admitted. "The simplicity of it. Do your job, do it well, keep people safe. Now everything is complicated." "The work you're doing now keeps people safe too," Harrison reminded her, "just in a different way." She nodded. "Different way, same mission." As the KOD aircraft carried her away from the USS Ronald Reagan, Rodriguez watched the massive carrier grow smaller in the distance. In her pocket, she carried the challenge coin from the flight deck crew, alongside her Navy and Marine Corps medal reminders of her 2 lives, the decorated flight deck hero and the undercover investigator. Both roles served the same purpose: protecting the sailors and airmen who put their lives on the line every day. Her next assignment was already waiting: another carrier, another potential threat, another cover identity to assume. And while the role might change, her mission remained constant: to serve and protect, whether under her true identity or a carefully crafted facade. For Petty Officer First Class Vanessa Rodriguez, the most important thing was never who got the credit, only that the job got done and that her fellow sailors made it home safely.